You start the game, tap the app, click the icon, and then nothing happens. Or at least, nothing visible. The screen fades, a soft blur settles in, a little circle begins to spin. A bar creeps forward at its own pace. You're left sitting there, doing nothing, watching something unfold that you don't control. You're not where you were, and you're not yet where you're going. You're suspended, waiting. This isn't part of the story. It isn't gameplay. It isn't even interface. It's something else. A strange space in between. A digital limbo. And yet, it's so familiar. You've seen this place 1,000 times. Maybe you don't even notice it anymore. But that's the point. We've stopped seeing the loading screen because we've trained ourselves to hate stillness. We live in a culture that's obsessed with motion. Speed is everything. We measure progress in how fast things respond. If it doesn't load instantly, something must be wrong. We reload, tap harder, blame the Wi-Fi. But the truth is simple. Some things just take time. And loading screens are the last places in our digital lives where we're forced to accept that. They're not broken moments. They're honest ones. They show us what happens when we're not in control, when we're not multitasking, when we're just there, waiting, and that's what makes them so interesting. The loading screen is a ritual, not a mistake, not a glitch, a soft threshold between one state and another, from menu to mission, from silence to signal. And like all rituals, it tells us something about who we are. It's easy to dismiss these screens as filler, but what if they're more than that? What if they're mirrors, quiet, hypnotic spaces that reflect back something deeper? Our discomfort with slowness, our need for feedback, our struggle with not being in control. This isn't a video about bad hardware or poor design. It's not a rant about lag. It's about what it means to wait, what that moment between moments really holds, and how something as simple as a spinning circle might be saying more than we think. So next time you see it just for a second, don't look away. That's not just a delay. That's where you live. Waiting makes us nervous. Even when it's just a few seconds, it taps into something uncomfortable. A spinning circle can feel like a failure. A progress bar that hesitates for a moment too long feels like the system broke. Or maybe like we tapped the screen, we reload the page, we curse the app. Because in that moment, we're not just waiting for data, we're confronting powerlessness. That's what makes loading screens psychologically fascinating. They're not just technical delays, they're emotional ones. When we're forced to wait, we're also forced to surrender control, and most of us hate that. We've been trained by modern life to expect instant results. We press a button and something happens. If it doesn't, we assume something's gone wrong. But what if it hasn't? What if that little pause is working exactly as intended? Not just on a technical level, but on a psychological one. Loading screens are designed with this discomfort in mind. They don't just show you that something is happening, they show you how much is happening, or at least they pretend to. The spinning icon, the crawling progress bar, the estimated time countdown. These are not just visual elements, they're tools of emotional management. They're designed to give us the illusion of progress, to make waiting feel acceptable, even tolerable. We can handle waiting as long as we feel like we're moving. But the moment the bar freezes, or the spinner loops too long without change, that illusion collapses, and we remember that we're stuck. That we're not in control, that all we can do is wait, and that we're not very good at that anymore. Our brains crave input, feedback, dopamine. We scroll, tap, refresh, repeat. When we're idle, we panic. We fill the silence. So when a loading screen asks us to do nothing, it feels almost insulting. Like we've been demoted from user to observer. We're not choosing anymore. We're being carried. But here's the twist. That shift in control, that pause, it can be a kind of relief. In a world that demands constant action, being told to stop can feel strangely comforting. You don't have to think. You don't have to choose. You just wait. And maybe, for a second, your brain lets go. Designers know this. That's why so many loading screens are carefully constructed to feel smooth, even when the system is working hard. The bar doesn't move in real time. It moves in a rhythm meant to soothe you. Sometimes it jumps from 10% to 90%, just to make it feel like something's happening. Then it stalls. But not because the system is broken, because it's handling you, not just files. This is behavioral design. It's emotional UX. The system knows you're impatient, so it gives you just enough to keep you calm. It lies a little for your own comfort, and in a strange way, we appreciate that. We don't want to know how long it really takes. We want to feel like we're not wasting time, but maybe we're not wasting it at all. Maybe that time, the pause between click and action, is doing something to us. Or for us, maybe it's slowing us down just enough to notice something, to breathe, to reset. We often talk about surrender like it's a weakness, but surrender is also a form of trust. When we let go of control, we're trusting that something will arrive, that the process will continue, that the system will come back to us with something new. In that sense, waiting is an act of quiet faith, and the loading screen becomes the altar for that faith. A tiny, silent space where we practice being patient, where we sit with uncertainty, where we let the world do what it needs to do without demanding it happen on our schedule. In the end, the psychology of loading isn't just about frustration, it's about vulnerability. And what we do when we're reminded that, despite all our progress bars and optimizations, some things still take time, and that maybe that's not such a bad thing. There's something oddly familiar about the shape of a loading icon. Most of the time, it's a circle. It loops endlessly, spins in place, never breaks, never stops, just turns, slowly, smoothly, silently. That shape isn't accidental, it means something. Circles have always meant something. In mythology, in religion, in psychology, the circle is one of the oldest human symbols. It shows up in mandalas, halos, Ouroboros, snakes eating their own tails. It represents eternity, cycles, birth and rebirth, death and return. There's no start or end, just movement, just presence. And in that way, the loading circle doesn't just show time passing. It shows a kind of timelessness. It places us in a space where beginnings and endings blur, where we're no longer looking forward or backward, but just sitting in the loop. Suspended, it's calming sometimes. Other times, it's hypnotic, but it always suggests something deeper than simple waiting. It suggests we're in a moment outside of time, a digital version of purgatory. We're not here, we're not there. We're in between. That in between space is powerful, because in most of life, we avoid it. We like definition, we like labels, we like arrival. But a loading screen gives us none of that. It strips away context. No game, no app, no story, just a spinner, a message, a dark screen, and yet it feels full. Full of anticipation, full of tension, full of possibility. It's like standing in a hallway between two rooms. You're not living in either one, but you can still feel both pressing in on you. You know something is coming. You just don't know when. That space, that liminal zone, holds more meaning than we usually allow, because life itself is full of those in-betweens. We're always transitioning from childhood to adulthood, from one belief to another, from one version of ourselves to the next. And most of the time, that's where the real stuff happens. In the middle, we don't talk about it much. Our culture loves arrival, achievement, completion, but underneath that, we all know the truth. We're always buffering, always updating, always loading. The metaphor almost writes itself. Think about how we talk. I'm processing. I'm getting there. I need a second. These are all echoes of the same feeling, that sense of being caught mid-transition, that sense of not being fully here or fully ready, but trying anyway. And the loading screen captures that beautifully. It doesn't give us an answer. It doesn't tell us how long it will take. It just reminds us that something is happening, even if we can't see it in that way. The loading screen becomes a mirror of the human condition. We spin in place, telling ourselves we're almost ready, almost done, almost enough. We mark our time with invisible progress bars. We chase updates. We wait for things to load. Our minds, our relationships, our futures. It's easy to dismiss all this as overthinking. It's just a spinning icon, after all. Just a delay between screens. But sometimes the smallest symbols hold the most meaning. And sometimes a moment of nothing is the most honest part of the whole experience. Because maybe we're not supposed to be in a constant state of action. Maybe we're meant to pass through these blank spaces. Maybe they teach us how to exist, not as finished products, but as works in progress. And maybe the loading screen doesn't represent a delay at all. Maybe it represents us. There's something oddly comforting about repetition. Something quiet, something sacred. We don't always notice it, but rituals are built from this kind of repetition. A gesture repeated over and over becomes meaningful. Lighting a candle, pressing your palms together, stepping into a place and knowing exactly what comes next in the digital world. Loading screens have become one of our most repeated rituals. We see them every day, maybe dozens of times. And though they're easy to overlook, they follow a pattern we've all come to recognize. The fade in, the logo, the spinner, the bar, the brief message. Sometimes it says loading. Sometimes, please wait. Sometimes nothing at all, but we know what it means. We've learned the shape of it, and just like a ritual, we never expect it to change. It's always a little boring. That's the point. Boredom, after all, is one of the first stages of stillness. It opens up space, not for action, but for awareness. It might seem strange to compare a loading screen to a spiritual practice, but the effect is similar. It removes choice. It pauses time. It gives the mind a moment to float, even if we're not conscious of it. In that pause, something opens up. We start to notice things we normally wouldn't. A reflection in the screen, the sound of the fan, in the room, the shape of our own breath. We usually fill those spaces. Pick up the phone, check another app, scroll through something, anything. But in the absence of multitasking, the mind sometimes settles, like dust in a still room. It's not silence, exactly, but it's close. Think about elevators, about long red lights, about airport lounges. These aren't exciting places, but they're transitional. And in that transition, people stare off into space. They fidget, they sigh, they think. These are the liminal moments of physical life. And the loading screen is their digital counterpart. They don't demand attention, but they invite something quieter. Reflection, observation, a kind of micro-dash, meditation, of course. We don't always accept the invitation. We try to avoid it. We reach for distraction. But the invitation is still there. Every time the screen fades and the spinner starts turning, we're given a tiny opportunity to pause, to breathe, to not act. And that's rare. In a digital world that never stops moving, the act of not doing something is almost revolutionary. It's a kind of enforced presence. You're here, but you can't go forward. Not yet. You're in the middle. You're still becoming. In that space, something quiet grows. The loading screen becomes less about function and more about preparation. Not for the game or the app, but for you, for your attention, for your presence. It resets your focus. It brings you back to the moment, even when it's frustrating, even when it feels too long. It still works on you. It still places you into that strange rhythm between effort and outcome, between desire and arrival. It's the same rhythm you find in prayer, in breathing exercises, in rituals we perform without always understanding them. So maybe the loading screen isn't empty at all. Maybe it's full, not of content, but of potential. And maybe, without even realizing it, we've been practicing a kind of digital mindfulness. One frame at a time, one spinner at a time, one breath at a time. We like to joke about waiting. Buffering wheels become memes. Spinning circles get turned into punchlines. There are TikToks where the screen loads forever, just to frustrate the viewer on purpose. It's funny, but it's also revealing, because deep down, we're all feeling it. The anxiety, the pressure, the discomfort of a pause that we didn't ask for. In a world that moves faster every year, loading feels like failure. It interrupts the illusion of constant momentum. It slows down the dopamine loop, and it reminds us that for all our sleek devices and fiber optic dreams, time still exists, and we still have to wait. So we laugh at it, we mock it, we meme it into oblivion, because that's how we deal with things that make us uncomfortable. Humor becomes a shield against stillness, and the loading screen becomes an easy target. But underneath that humor is something more serious. A cultural discomfort with waiting, a belief that stillness is wasted, that progress must always be visible, that value is measured in how quickly something responds. We don't just hate waiting, we fear what it suggests, that we're not in control, that we're not important, that the system isn't working for us right now. We live in a world that rewards hustle and punishes pause. And in that world, a loading screen becomes an accusation. It says, slow down, and we hear, you're falling behind. This is the logic of speed culture. It's not just about technology. It's about productivity. Multitasking isn't just a skill anymore. It's a moral good. To be idle is to be inefficient. To be inefficient is to be irrelevant. That's the real anxiety underneath the spinner. It's not just waiting. It's being seen, not doing. And yet, Not everyone waits the same way. In places with fast internet, top-tier phones, cloud-accelerated everything, loading screens barely exist. Apps open instantly. Games stream, assets mid-level. Delays have been shaved down to milliseconds. But in other places, with slower devices, weaker infrastructure, shared connections, the wait is still very real. Sometimes painfully so, and that's where the cultural divide shows itself most clearly. Even waiting has become a class issue. Access to instant response has become a kind of privilege, a new form of status. If your phone loads in a blink, you've bought speed, you've bought presence, you've bought freedom from the wait. But if your phone stalls, if your connection stutters, if the spinner turns just a little too long, suddenly you're outside of the rhythm. You're not part of the fast world anymore. You're in the slow line, the lagging queue, and that separation is not just technical, it's emotional, psychological, social. Because fast tech is framed as modern, smart, evolved, and slow tech is framed as broken, outdated, frustrating. So when your device loads slowly, it's not just annoying, it can feel humiliating, like you're being left behind, and this inequality stretches deeper. Schools where students share one outdated computer, hospitals with old systems that lag during emergencies, people trying to access vital services through devices that can barely run them. In those spaces, loading isn't just a pause, it's a barrier. That's what makes the loading screen such a powerful cultural mirror. It reflects not only our relationship to time, but also to power, to status, to worth. Who gets to move fast? Who's allowed to wait? Who's expected to be patient? And who never has to be? And the cruel irony is that those with the least control over their time are often the ones forced to spend the most of it waiting, not just on devices, but in lines, on hold, in systems that don't respond quickly or at all. The digital world was supposed to flatten those differences, to bring speed and access to everyone, but it hasn't. It's just made the gaps more visible. So when we see that loading spinner, it's never just a technical pause. It's layered with emotion, with expectation, with social tension. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's maddening, sometimes it's nothing, but it always reflects something, because a culture obsessed with speed will always treat waiting like failure, and a system that hides its slowest moments behind sleek UX will always leave someone behind. The spinner is disappearing. Slowly, quietly, almost without us noticing, loading screens are being erased. Faster processors, solid-state drives, cloud streaming, predictive caching, all of them working toward a single goal: to eliminate friction, to make everything seamless, instant, invisible. A world where you tap and it just works. On the surface, that sounds ideal. Who wouldn't want speed without waiting? Who wouldn't want progress without interruption? It feels like the final step in a long evolution, from long cassette loads and hourglasses to now, where the delay has almost vanished. But maybe we should ask, when loading disappears, what else disappears with it? Because loading wasn't just a technical delay. It was a moment, a space between intention and result, a breath between desire and reward. And now that space is being paved over. Modern UX design isn't just about speed, it's about hiding the wait. The process still happens, the data still loads, the system still works, but you don't see it. It happens behind animations, behind splash screens, in the background, out of view. And on the surface, that's progress. But underneath, it raises a strange question. What happens when we don't know we're waiting anymore? We used to have a visible relationship with time. The bar moved, the circle spun. We were part of the rhythm, even if we didn't like it. But now, the rhythm is gone. Or rather, it's still there, just hidden, silenced, and in that silence, something gets lost. Waiting, when we're aware of it, invites reflection. It opens space. It reminds us that not everything can be instant, that effort takes time, that change needs patience. But when we erase that awareness, we erase the very feeling of process. We move from one thing to another without ever acknowledging the space between. The result is a world that feels smoother, but emptier, faster, but thinner. The anticipation is gone. The build-up, the preparation, the breath before the drop, all smoothed into a flat, continuous scroll. And maybe that's the point. UX design isn't neutral. It shapes our behavior. And in this case, it teaches us not to notice the wait, to skip past the transition, to live in a kind of seamless loop where nothing ever pauses and nothing ever settles. But even when we don't see it, we're still waiting. The system still loads. The files still transfer. The lag still happens. It's just packaged differently now, wrapped in animation, disguised by motion. What used to be a visible delay has become invisible design, and invisibility is its own kind of control. When we know we're waiting, we push back, we tap the screen, we frown, we ask questions. But when the wait is hidden, when we no longer see it, we stop questioning. We accept the delay as part of the experience. We're not invited to reflect. We're just kept moving. That's the trade. The cleaner the experience, the less we notice ourselves inside it. The smoother the system, the harder it is to step outside of it. Friction slows us down, yes, but it also wakes us up. And in a world trying to keep us constantly moving, maybe we need that friction more than we realize. The loading screen was once a boundary, a soft edge, a signal that one thing had ended and another was about to begin. Without that edge, everything starts to blur together. Every action collapses into the next. Every moment becomes one long, uninterrupted now. And maybe that's efficient. Maybe that's progress. But it's also a little eerie, because when everything is instant, nothing feels earned. When there's no wait, there's no wait. We think we've killed the loading screen, but maybe we've just hidden it behind something prettier. And maybe, in doing so, we've hidden a small part of ourselves. There's this memory I can't shake. I must have been 12, maybe 13. I'd just gotten a new game. Not a great one, not even memorable, but I remember the loading screen. It was long, agonizingly long. A dark, quiet screen with a flickering logo in the corner. No tips, no music, just that faint hum of the console and a few seconds, or maybe a full minute, where I sat with nothing to do. At the time, I hated it. But now, looking back, it's the part I remember most clearly. Not the story, not the characters, just that moment of stillness before it all began. That strange, suspended pause, where the world hadn't loaded yet, but I was already there, waiting. There's something profound about that. Something human. We tend to think of loading as an inconvenience, a technical flaw. But what if it's something more? What if it's the one place in the digital world where time reasserts itself? where we're reminded that not everything can be instant, that not everything should be instant. Because loading, in its most honest form, is not just about data. It's about desire, anticipation, the gap between wanting and having, between intention and experience. It's the space where meaning collects, where tension builds, where the mind prepares to cross from one state into another, and we don't get many of those anymore. Most of life has been flattened, sped up, optimized, but the loading screen resists that. It tells us, not yet. It invites us to stop, to feel the boundary between before and after. That boundary matters. Rituals live there. Emotions live there. The sense that something is about to begin lives there. And when we erase those boundaries, when we remove the pause, the breath, the quiet little delay, we lose more than time. We lose texture. We lose weight. We lose the shape of the moment. Because the truth is, we're always loading, always transitioning, always in the middle of something. We're not finished. We're not fixed. We're not fully here. We're in motion, in progress, between versions of ourselves, between answers, between screens. The spinner is still turning, whether we see it or not. And maybe that's the final gift of the loading screen. It doesn't just show us the machine is thinking. It reminds us we are it. Reminds us that there's value in the wait. That something doesn't have to be immediate to be meaningful. That even in stillness, maybe especially in stillness, something is happening, so maybe. Next time the screen fades to black and that little circle starts to spin, don't look away. Don't reload. Don't reach for distraction. Just sit with it. Because that tiny pause, that moment where nothing happens, might be the most honest place we've got left. That's where life is. Not in the button you pressed, not in the thing you're waiting for, but in the waiting itself. That's where you live.